The Delta Flight Museum is a showcase of the history of America's oldest airline still in existence. The Delta Flight Museum is located within the global headquarters of Delta Airlines, just north of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, and walking distance from the Renaissance Concourse Hotel, which itself has great views for plane spotting. Past the security gate, visitors are greeted with various aircraft that have served the airline over the years. We'll revisit them later. The museum consists of two original Delta Airlines hangars from the 1940s, now dedicated to the prop era and the modern jet age, with access to both from the main entrance. Welcome to the prop era, where you're greeted not only by an actual Hamilton standard propeller, no relation, but also a 1940 Douglas DC-3, retired by Delta Airlines in 1958. Now, this aircraft, after heavy renovation, would go on to serve North Central Airlines, part of Northwest Airlines, who would later merge with Delta in 2008. Overhead is a replica of a Huff Duster, the first aircraft designed for aerial crop dusting. Delta Airlines originated as a crop dusting company in the late 1920s, later adopting its current name from its service in the Mississippi Delta. Visitors will learn how propeller engines work, as well as about flight controls, thanks to a DC-3 simulator, where you'll control the roll, the pitch, and the yaw of a model aircraft. Center stage is a 1931 Travel Air 6B sedan for Delta Air Service, the airline's first passenger aircraft. And the back wall of the prop era pays homage to the various airlines that make up today's carrier, including Chicago and Southern Airlines, Northeast Airlines, Western Airlines, Pan Am, and of course, Northwest. You'll see artifacts from various aircraft, including passenger seats, flight gear, travel logs, and radio equipment, flight attendant uniforms, and dinnerware. And the area is capped by a replica of Delta's original office, as well as a 1941 Stinson Reliant training aircraft for Northeast Airlines. But hidden behind the walls of the prop era is the aircraft model room. Installed in 2018, the display features scale models, big and small, showing Delta Airlines in its various colors, as well as other carriers in its family tree, and its airline partners. Nearby is the Chairman's Club Gallery, honoring staff who have earned top recognition by the airline, as well as the American Express Theater, anchored by a 1928 Waco 125, used for movie showings and other scheduled events.
It's official. Can you write that? That's one of those moments that I like.
As you enter a tunnel and forward in time, there it is. Welcome to the jet age. Easily the main attraction of the entire museum, the spirit of Delta looms over the massive floor space dedicated to the airline we know today. You'll get up close and personal with the tale of a Douglas DC-9. Delta Airlines launched the type in 1965, with intermittent service until 2014. We'll revisit that point later. Across the way is the cockpit of a prototype Convair 880, another aircraft launched by Delta in 1960 before retiring in 1974. The floor of the jet age features luggage carts paying tribute to the cargo handlers and the operations teams over the years, as well as engines from a Douglas DC-8. You'll see the promotional hot air balloon donated by the Virgin Group, a corporate partner, as well as the $12 million flight simulator of a Boeing 737-200 used by the airline, whose tickets are sold separately from the main museum. And you'll also get a glimpse of the modern evolution of Delta Airlines, from the crown rooms to the sky clubs, and all of the services, navigation, and technology that kept the airline afloat, all of which culminated in a very special tribute.
Braniff International Airlines earlier today announced a system-wide layoff of up to 3,000 workers.
In just 2 hours, Eastern Airlines will no longer be flying.
Pan Am has sold now its most valuable assets to Delta.
In the early 1980s, U.S. airlines were reeling from deregulation and a really bad economy, where Delta Airlines posted a loss after 25 straight years of profit. Employees launched Project 767 to raise money for the carrier's first copy of the type, which was brand new at the time. In 1982, after raising $30 million US, staff and friends of the airline presented Ship 102, nicknamed the Spirit of Delta. Since being retired from service in 2006, the Boeing jetliner looms majestic over the other attractions, measuring 159 feet or 48 meters in length, rising 52 feet or 16 meters high, with a wingspan of 156 feet, and a ground clearance of about 6 feet, just shy of 2 meters. You can actually board this aircraft, just past a prototype L-1011 from 1970, now a conference room. But beyond the dummy controls of a jet bridge, you're walking back in time, back to a time I'm quite familiar with, the roots of birdwatching. This is the ambiance I grew up with. The first half of the aircraft is pristine from its final flight, complete with ashtrays, projector screens, and seatback phones. While the aft section exhibits the various flight attendant uniforms, including special designs based on global destinations, and the presumed future of air travel. Among other scale models, press articles, and dedications, the Spirit of Delta is capped by a galley, where the Delta professionals are preparing service for their high-flying passengers. By now, it's time to visit the aircraft outside the museum hangars, but not before noticing the flight attendant jump seats in the forward cabin and taking an up-close look at the flight deck. Now, you may have noticed the massive sign over the showroom. It came from the Worldport, Terminal 3 at JFK, which was one of the many assets from Pan Am acquired by Delta Airlines in the early 1990s. The terminal has since been demolished. But back to the main lobby. You'll notice the 7-foot or 2-meter wide fan blades and cowling of a Rolls-Royce RB211 engine that powered one of Delta's many L-1011s. This leads you straight to the museum gift shop, with branded clothing items, models, drinkware, and more. But now it's time to go outside. 4 aircraft line the museum parking lot, starting with this 1957 Douglas DC-7, a type retired by Delta Airlines in 1968 as their final piston-driven aircraft. This made way for the Douglas DC-8, a type they launched in 1959 as their first jet aircraft. Delta launched the DC-9 program in 1965, operating the type until 1993, but that would change after merging with Northwest Airlines in 2008, where the DC-9 would serve a few more years with the carrier, including this build from 1975. While the DC-9 has many descendants, including the MD-80 subfamily, the MD-90, and the Boeing 717, Delta will become the final US carrier to fly the standard DC-9s in 2014. That's 177 frames over nearly 50 years. Across the way is a Boeing 757 in its most widely recognized livery, powered by the famous Pratt & Whitney PW2037 engine. This 1985 build served until 2013, including a year with Song Airlines, Delta's low-cost project from the mid-2000s. To note, this aircraft wore nearly all of the paint schemes associated with the airline during its time in service, restored to its classic widget paint scheme before being put on display in 2014. But greater than all of that is the Queen of the Skies, hosting her very own breathtaking exhibit. The 747 experience is just that, an experience. This is Ship 6301, the very first Boeing 747-400 ever made. With this one entering service for Northwest in December '89, when I was just 6 months old, the 400 series will become the most popular of the jumbo jets at 694 frames, nearly half of the production line. You just stare at those dependable Pratt & Whitney engines, powering an aircraft 60 feet high and more than 200 feet in length, with a wingspan just as wide and weighing 400,000 pounds, or 180,000 kilos. This aircraft came to Delta from the Northwest merger, 30 years after Delta flew their last jumbo jet in the late 1970s because they were too big at the time. Delta retired them for the second and final time in 2017, marking the end of passenger 747 service for US carriers. Retired in 2016, Ship 6301 spent a year in renovations, arriving at the museum in March 2017, where you can now walk in and see some of the inner workings of one of the world's largest aircraft. After a brief security screening, you'll enter the main deck and most likely turn right. This part of the aircraft is basically a cross-section, giving you a clear shot of the fuel tank, which carried nearly 58,000 gallons or 217,000 liters of jet fuel, as well as the cable systems for the rudder. At the very back of the aircraft, beyond the various facts and figures, is a pressure dome, which helps keep the aircraft intact while cruising due to the difference in pressure inside and outside the cabin. But to the left of that, you'll notice a passage. This darkened area is the crew quarters, and this is still located on the main deck. The main fuselage of a 747 is about 20 feet or 6 meters high, where from here, you walk well over 100 feet to the still furnished nose of the aircraft. But first, let's get a view from the wing. Back inside is one of the forward galleys, complete with a dumbwaiter to send carts between the upper and main decks. This lies within Delta Comfort Plus. And ahead of that, inside of the nose of the aircraft, is Delta One, home to 48 pods with retractable armrests, television, power, and lie flat seats. Delta One continues upstairs inside the signature hump.
Well, they're getting old.
And much like the spirit of Delta, you're offered a glimpse into one of the world's largest cockpits. Thanks to the state-of-the-art technology at the time, the 400 series was the first 747 to have a glass cockpit, replacing gauges with digital instrumentation. The pilot rest area lies just behind the jump seats.
That's crazy.
The 747 experience allows you to see almost every nook and cranny of one of the world's greatest aircraft, with an elevation high enough to do some pretty good plane spotting upon exiting. But you're a complete ass if you don't take at least one last look at one of the giants of aviation. In 2020, Delta unveiled an Airbus A321 with the names of all 90,000 employees at the time, literally as a thank you. 1 year later, beneath the wings of the 747, the airline installed a massive sculpture of their slogan, "Keep Climbing," where you'll find the names of all Delta mainline employees at the time of construction. The Delta Flight Museum is a must-see for any Av geek visiting the Atlanta area. Business hours are from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time every day except Wednesdays, and is located at 1060 Delta Boulevard, Building B, where you'll show your ID at the security gate and get a visitor sticker. There's a metal detector in the main lobby, where you can pay for tickets at the counter or book online in advance. Pricing depends on closures at the museum, where the 747 and/or the hangars are blocked for events. Tickets are free for children under 5, with full museum admission topping out at $14 a person. There are discounts for Delta and other airline employees, as well as for youth, seniors, and members of the military. Pricing for the simulator is separate from general admission at $390 with limited availability. Guided tours and events are also available, where you can learn more at deltamuseum.org or by calling 404-715-7886. The 747 runs from 11 to 3 and is completely accessible outside and on the main deck. There's also a real-time departure board for the airport inside the jet age, right next to the Spirit of Delta. You'll need most of a day to fully take in the museum. I arrived at 10 a.m. and rushing, didn't leave until 3 that evening. Delta wants you to keep climbing, and that I did. Well, walking. Back to the Renaissance Hotel for another round of birdwatching.